Okay, before we get started, I just want you guys to put down below, did chapter 1009 change how you felt about Zoro or any preconceived notions you had about Zoro? I know for me personally, it didn't, but it did give me a more optimistic look for his future, or rather an optimistic outcome. So give me your thoughts, let me know how you feel about Zoro pre-1009 and post-1009, because I've been seeing a lot of comments. So we're gonna address the comments, and that's the main topic of this video. Zoro post chapter 1009. But before we get to that, if you're here for the first time, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Sometimes you may watch a few videos and don't even realize that you're not subscribed. Now is the time to do so, and drop a like as well. Without further ado, let's talk about Zoro. Spoiler alert, if you haven't read chapter 1009, you will be spoiled. Zoro did one of the greatest things we've ever seen in the story, where Zoro managed to block a combined attack from Big Mom and Kaido. So that's two Yonko. They sent an attack and Zoro was able to block it. Now, he was able to block it momentarily. I'm not gonna say he was only able to block it momentarily, because that would be downplaying what Zoro was able to accomplish, which I see some people trying to do, saying the Viz said only 1 second, things of that nature, and trying to compare and say, oh, other characters could have done the same thing. I think the argument or the discussion about other characters being able to do it should come separately from trying to take away from Zoro's feat, where that is a very interesting discussion, but you should separate the two. Don't combine them or try to conflate these two things and say, oh, Zoro was able to do this, but this character could do this. No, Zoro was able to do this, period. Let's talk about other characters that could do that, period. Separate thoughts, giving Zoro his just due. The other part of this is trying to say Zoro was able to block it for 1 second. Now, personally, I don't think that matters, because at the end of the day, it just doesn't, because saying Zoro did it for 1 second doesn't necessarily take away from him. But of course, there are a bunch of bad faith arguments out there. So let's touch on this really quickly. Basically, a second in the chapter doesn't literally mean a second. They were able to have dialogue in the midst of this attack. So therefore, based on how just regular human speech happens, all this transpired within more than a second. I'm going to assume 3 or 4 seconds. Zoro was able to block it momentarily, and therefore he gave Law time to transport them, etc. Again, we're not going to try to take away from Zoro here. If you had asked me beforehand if Zoro was able to do this, I would say no. I would have probably mentioned Enma, or say Enma would have done something to absorb the attacks. Of course, the diehard Zoro stands and fans, they believe Zoro can do anything, which I think is part of the issue. When Zoro does something great, there are people that definitely overhype it, but there are also people that downplay these moments, and I think they kind of counter each other, where some people downplay it because they expect people to overhype it, so therefore they feel like they're bringing about the balance in the community, which is a fair point, because a lot of Zoro stands, they do go too far with the Zoro hype, where post chapter 1009, I'm seeing people starting to say, well, maybe Zoro has eclipsed Luffy. Could Luffy do something like this? Luffy's still running out of haki. Zoro may be the captain now, right? Which, okay, based off of what happened in the last chapter, it's crazy. I'm not gonna even justify that and say, oh, but you know, it's not. No, it's crazy, right? To say that Zoro has surpassed Luffy based on how everything that Luffy has already done. Now, saying Zoro is equal to Luffy, that's something I'd entertain a lot more, as opposed to saying Zoro has surpassed Luffy. I mentioned this before and people said I was crazy about it, but there's a discussion or an argument talking about if Zoro was stronger than Luffy coming out of the time skip. Now, one of the reasons why I always say that is because I think Zoro and Mihawk probably is a better fit in regards to training and their actual goal, as opposed to Rayleigh and Luffy. Now, Luffy was mainly trying to learn haki, and you know, he was overall trying to grow stronger, but Rayleigh could not teach Luffy the specifics of his devil fruit. Rayleigh could only teach him the basics of haki, where for Zoro, he had Mihawk, who is the world's greatest swordsman. Zoro's goal is to become the world's greatest swordsman, so therefore it went hand in hand with arm and haki, blade, techniques. Everything was there for Zoro to become stronger. So again, you can argue, first off, Mihawk was more than likely stronger than Rayleigh at the time. It's a better match for Zoro, and when you combine all these things, you would expect more growth for Zoro, you know, during the time skip. It's hard to pinpoint exactly how and when Luffy would have surpassed Zoro, or when Zoro is stronger than Luffy. But going forward, what are my expectations for Zoro? Because I have something planned, and I'll tell you guys here. I'm going to grade Zoro's performance so far in Wano based on just regular expectations, right? I'm not going to give him the lofty expectations that the Zoro stands have for him, or the meager expectations that some Zoro haters have for him. Just average expectations going into the arc based on what we expected. How is he performing? We'll do that for Zoro, Luffy, and Sanji. And of course, it'd be a so far video because there's more arc to go, right? Somebody did actually say, though, that if this is all Zoro does in the arc and he's done for now, then he would be trash, which I vehemently disagree with, because Zoro has done so much and a lot, even things that I think go overlooked, but we'll talk about that. Post chapter 1009, blocking to Yonko, which, perhaps could be his greatest feat. I compare it to Nothing Happened. I think I may put Nothing Happened slightly above it, just because of just how major that moment was, and also Zoro's condition when he took all of that pain. In this moment, yes, it was a couple seconds to match that power and to stop it even momentarily. And I can't even wrap my head around it, but Zoro did it, right? And another thing that people have to understand is that yes, other characters may be able to do this based on strength, ability, whatever, but in this situation, Zoro was the person to jump in front of this first. He took charge and said, you know what, we have to stop this. If I don't, we will be obliterated. And Zoro, again, mentally took that step first, which is part of being a conquering king. I don't know why Zoro does not have Conqueror's Haki, but he just doesn't, right? Oda hasn't shown it yet, or he hasn't shown it yet. But moments like this shows why Zoro is such a dominant personality and why he's such a fan favorite, because he just does cool shit. Something also this moment showed me, it would take a lot. I'm talking about a lot to put Zoro down. Like, we already knew that, but I think it highlights even more just how much Zoro was not pushed post time skip. We all talk about Pika being Zoro's toughest matchup, other than Fujitora, of course, which was more so a clash. Pika had absolutely no chance with Zoro. I would have loved a more back and forth with Fujitora. Of course, if you've seen Stampede, you saw more of it, but that's not canon. Still feels like canon, but it's not canon. And Zoro just hasn't been pushed. As great as One Piece has been post time skip, I think that's been one of the issues, that the Straw Hats, they haven't been fleshed out, even as characters and as combatants, where we still haven't seen Zoro's strongest attack pre-time skip, and we are at chapter 1010, going into chapter 1010, which I think is a bit ridiculous. However, Zoro has been performing despite not being in the position to show some of his abilities. But like I was saying, to put Zoro down, it would take a lot. So when I think of people like Killer, Apu, Capone, people like that, the other supernovas, they would have no chance against Zoro. I think Zoro would overpower them, and even if they could land attacks, no effect. I mean, he would just power through them. And we saw a glimpse of that when he actually fought Kamazo, the Manslayer, which we know is Killer, and he took an attack and he just brushed it off. So when I think of Zoro versus Luffy, I start thinking of the power that Luffy has, where he was able to overpower someone like Katakuri, but that power does not match the same power of Yonko, but an energy blast and a straight up physical blow, those are two separate things, and just the energy that and the force behind these two things, they're different. Whereas the momentum from a physical attack is more immediate than an energy blast, where it is continuously coming, which sounds weird as hell. Zoro's defeat, it's hard to see it. Now, there's a side of the community where I'm not going to discredit them, because I think they're making valid points, where they're saying this just doesn't make any sense. I was on that side when I initially reacted to the chapter, because I thought Zoro just blocked it without any assistance. And I was like, okay, this is super hype. I was losing my mind. But how was Zoro able to block an attack from Yonko by himself? We now know it was done with the aid of law, right, which is cool, but it's still a bit shaky. This is the strongest attack we've seen in this series. And Zoro was able to jump in front of this attack, stop it momentarily, and he lived. Of course, he's super damaged. He was coughing up blood at the end, and Zoro being damaged in an arc is not something new. Pre-time skip, we were all fed up, like, come on, we need Zoro healthy for an arc. Please, can we keep him healthy? Because one thing was always like that built-in nerf of Zoro, and it just felt like Oda was putting him in situations where he had an excuse, and now he's hurt, but he still has to cut Kaido with Enma. So we'll see how that plays out. So personally, I wasn't too bothered by him doing this, where again, some people, they did not like it because they felt like it was BS. I'm seeing a ton of comments saying this is BS. I don't know how he was able to do this. The only explanation is that he's built different. Again, this is something that I've done, and it's brought about more peace of mind than ever. It's just not to focus in on power scaling as much, or when I'm even reading the chapters, power scaling isn't even a factor, right? Especially in Wano and in Onigashima, we don't know what Oda's going to do with these characters. We don't know how strong these characters are. They haven't gone all out. So going into it, I expect great things, but when something happens, it's like, okay, let's take off the power scaling lens and just enjoy the story. For some people, they cannot do that because power scaling is part of story consistency, where if you create a scenario, for instance, the Yonko, and you build up this threat, and you have Law saying it's 30% to defeat him, you have Luffy getting overpowered in one shot, you have all these things building it up, and then all of a sudden Kaido goes down with no problem, the consistency of the story would damage your immersion. It would affect it. So for some people, when they look at a story, it's not just they're overly focused on power scaling, is that the power scaling in a shonen battle manga, it goes along with the story consistency. And if the power scaling isn't consistent, some people would be totally tuned out because again, it's not consistent based on the story and the parameters that's been set up. For most One Piece readers, this isn't an issue because they're more focused on the story, and because of how many abilities there are in One Piece, there are multiple ways in which you can justify someone being defeated, right? So it's not just because A can beat B, that means A can beat C. Like those different abilities, they're weird. And again, Oda's introduction of just haki and how important it is with the mention of Law's Devil Fruit confirming that impacts that even more. I saw a video recently talking about Kong versus Godzilla and how they were appalled because I'm not gonna say, you know, which characters did what, but they were appalled because A was able to defeat B, but then A was beaten by C, but then C was beaten by B. And that's One Piece, right? Where abilities are so vast and they're so broken sometimes that you could just slip up and get a W on someone because they don't understand your abilities. But yeah, so power scaling overall, people always talk about power scalers, whatever. But one thing that's great for me, which I've learned over time, is that power scaling does not impact my enjoyment of the story whatsoever. Part of it is just turning off your brain, whatever. I'm not gonna focus on that. It's more so about the story elements. I'll talk about power scaling with my friends, either off air or when we do our top 30 or whatever. But for right now, post chapter 1009, Zoro's firmly, for me, a commander or even higher. Where if Zoro fights one of the commanders, any of the commanders, in my opinion, he could come out on top because of the devastating power that he has, the endurance, the durability. I mean, he has it all. There are no weaknesses in his game. So I don't know, man, this guy's looking overpowered. Maybe I've been underrating Zoro, and it's crazy to say that after what he did, but oh my gosh, he's amazing. He's amazing. And I'm sorry, I just really wanted to ramble a bit about Zoro post chapter 1009 because I think what he did was incredible, and I really can't wait to see what he does the rest of the arc. But guys, give me your thoughts. How do you feel about Zoro? Do you think Zoro is overrated, underrated, or just right? Because, you know, some people, they're starting to feel like Zoro's a bit overrated, but how can you say that after what he did with Ocean Sovereignty or Conquest of the Sea, right? But guys, give me your thoughts. Make sure to like the video if you did. Subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Follow me on Twitter at BragoDAce. Follow me on Instagram at BragoD.Ace. Thank you to my patrons. I appreciate you guys all so much. Guys, like, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.
I start doubting me, I felt lost.